Well, good afternoon and welcome and thank you for joining us today in our Koha's webinar series called Explore the Possibilities, where every month we talk about something to do with Koha or Bywater. And this month we're talking about open source. Why open source? And of course, we're probably, alluding a little bit to the fact that we're an open source support company. So why open source? Because we like open source, but we're going to break down some topics today to really discuss, what people think about open source, what are some not so truthful things, and maybe just lead you to understand a little bit more about open source than when you came here today. So my name is Kelly, and I work at Bywater Solutions as a library accounts coordinator, and you'll be spending some time with me. Again, as I said earlier, this is recorded, so we'll send this out to everyone who registered, as well as all our Explore the Possibilities webinar series are recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if this is your first webinar, you can dive back into the archives and go see some other topics where we talk about migration and talk about the staff interface and lots of different topics. I have Jessie here, and she'll be covering the Q&A and chat. So feel free to type in any questions, and she'll be able to help you, or stop me and interrupt me, and then go from there. So some facts about open source we're going to start with today. Potentially, you could already be using something that is open source currently, and maybe you didn't even know it. So I've added some software logos here, and maybe if you want to raise your hand, you can. But if there is a software that you are using that's open source, go ahead and let me know. I know I use Firefox every day, so that's the one that I use. I've also used LibreOffice in the past, which is a great alternative to Microsoft Word. Their proprietary software. And then, of course, we remember WordPress was really hot and popular back in the early, a decade ago, I guess. It feels crazy to think that that was a decade ago, for, websites. And there's also Linux, Java, and MySQL, which is just a few of those. So it's really fantastic to think about, that there are potentially softwares that are open source and you may have not even known it. So let's talk really a little bit more about open source specifically. When we talk about using software, every day, we talk about what are the advantages of using maybe LibreOffice over Microsoft Word or Google Docs. And one of the advantages of open source, or a couple of the advantages, is lower cost. So we can talk about lower costs in LibreOffice versus Microsoft Word. We have to pay for Microsoft Word, where LibreOffice is free and open. So lowering your costs in any way. We go back to the cable versus streaming outlets. We love to be able to lower our costs in any way that we can in our personal and our work life. There's also, options out there that maybe you're discounting because it is open source, because you think that there is some sort of stigma to open source, but the options for open source are out there and they're more technology savvy, in my opinion. Collaboration and community building, which I'll probably talk about the most throughout this presentation, because of Koha, the open source software that Bywater, one of the open source software that Bywater supports, is really, has been around since 2000 and has really been driven by community building. It's used worldwide, and that just shows you the amount of collaboration that is happening throughout the library world in being able to come together and continuously improve a product. So that's another advantage of open source, is just having that community building, that collaboration, and those kind of ideas out there that are percolating with us, and having the ability to kind of put it out there. I was just thinking, like, when I was, thinking about this presentation today, I was like, what if I didn't like how something worked in Microsoft Word? How would I identify that and talk to somebody to say, wouldn't it be great if it did this? So it's just interesting to think, I don't know how I would do that. I don't know how I would talk. I could certainly Google the answers and maybe find a workflow change. And that's just, other users of that. But this is a way to really get in there and make a difference. The development cycle. Open source is continuously evolving, and there is a cycle that happens as developments happen. So we can just, touch briefly on the Koha development cycle, which is twice a year. So twice a year, you're given fantastic features and enhancements that have been built by the community out there and pushed out to your software. So, that's really fantastic. I know Firefox, I'm forever going in there and it's saying upgrade because there are new upgrades or security risks. And we'll talk about security risks that have been fixed on your Firefox. So just remember that, when you see those upgrades, maybe we're rolling our eyes a bit because we have to maybe see that there's something a little different, but it's also to make improvements and to prevent security problems and risks throughout the software, which is fantastic. And then finally, the users. And, I talk back about, how do I tell somebody this doesn't work? You, as a user of open source, are going to be the people that can make a difference and make those changes and be that voice for open source and say, this is my kind of tagline, wouldn't it be better? So those are some of the advantages of open source that I wanted to talk about. Now, I think that talking about proprietary software is not really where we wanted to go, but I wanted to talk about a few things that in libraries, we probably you would avoid if you were to head down the open source road with me. That is vendor lock-in. To me, that is, fancy speak for no flexibility. So you are working off of a client. You are potentially not able to make any changes or make any decisions or have a voice in what is, or the possibility of the future of your software. So with open source, you are going to avoid that vendor lock-in. There is flexibility. There's lots of customizations, and you have the ability to leave whenever you want. There's no lock-in at all because it is free and downloadable. Open source is out there for everybody. Subscription costs. Again, because Koha and these other open source softwares that we talked about, they're free. They're downloadable. You go to the computer and you hit that pretty download button and it's yours. So there's no cost to that. For larger libraries that are out there, proprietary software are generally client-based, and then they have a per computer license cost. So think of those large libraries that have lots of computers and lots of staff, and that means you have to pay per computer to be able to use those. Open source, specifically Koha, is what we're talking about. It is downloadable, accessible on any web browser, so there's no cost, and everyone can use it at the same time. There's no limit to the number of people in your library that can access the Koha staff client that would be able to use that. So no cost in licenses. There are lack of customization. So because it is kind of like that client base, that vendor lock-in, you don't have the ability to customize the maybe look and feel because it is not accessible, and it would have to change for everyone, which means probably you would have to pay for that. So with Koha, and I should probably kind of house this whole world of open source. We have other open source products, Aspen Discovery, LibKey, Metabase. You are able to enhance your library's experience with customization. If you've worked at other Koha libraries, you'll see a lot of Koha ILSs look different, or they're highlighting different areas, or they're using Koha in a different way, because think about it, libraries are all unique as well. So it's not a one size fit all. And I think Koha has really narrowed that idea in their plans, future plans, past plans is to say we need to be able to work with all types of libraries and be able to customize the specific needs of those libraries. You have health libraries, museum libraries, huge multi-library consortiums, all the way down to maybe just like a one-room library in a school. So that is your driving force, is that, again, it's pretty much free. So you have the ability to use it regardless if you're super large or super small. It's not a one size fits all. With open source, a library will avoid security issues. And I brought up Firefox, and Koha is the same way. We have the ability in open source to be able to identify and detect security bugs faster. And with that, we push those out. There are monthly updates in Koha to really they're not features or enhancements. They're to make sure that the security issues are covered, because the world is evolving, and we want to make sure that we're capturing all that is good, and help you out and push away all that is bad. So remember that. Okay, so now let's talk about some maybe things that we've been told in the past about open source and the true facts. So it may be a myth you've heard, or those true false magazines. Is this true or this false? Open source is less secure than proprietary software. That is a myth. And I just said this earlier. With open source software, security issues will be quickly identified and fixed. So again, there's nothing less secure about open source. If in fact, it is probably more secure. And I can send over my resources if I want references, if you want me to, but lots of articles talked about how important it is to quickly get on top of bug fixes. And we're always being told by our systems team is make sure you're running the most up-to-date software. And that's our idea as well with our open source software that we host, is making sure you're up to date and there is no vulnerabilities there. A myth. IT staff is necessary to maintain open source software. Wrong. With open source software, a library can work with a support vendor, that's us, that will support and maintain your software, freeing time for staff. I worked at a public library in a small town in Vermont. It was a very small staff of like 4 of us, and we were supported by Bywater. I can tell you we had no IT support at all. And we had Bywater as the support company that we worked with. They were always there to answer the phone, answer our tickets, and they're able to identify and quickly fix any issues we had. So again, IT staff is great. That's not saying that you can't have IT staff at your library, but know that the support and hosting of your open source software with Bywater Solutions does not require IT staff. Myth out there. There's less support for open source software. Now, let me tell you, I wish this could be really big. Facts. There is a worldwide community of users that support, develop, and continually improve open source software. I've been working with Koha specifically since 2013, so I've gone 10 years, and I can say that the community of users that I can talk to, that I can ask questions, that I can, get some ideas from, are all out there. I also know with 2 upgrades a year with Koha, we are seeing hundreds, and I can say that again, hundreds of features and enhancements that are happening with every development. Because as the development cycle goes, and I'm probably way ahead of myself, but as the development cycle goes, you have users like myself or library users that use the software and submit things to say, wouldn't it be great to do this? You also have libraries that pay people to develop things and say, we want this to happen, and everybody gets it. And then you have community of users that are fixing potential bugs in Koha. They are also helping write the development and the patches for things that people say, wouldn't it be great? And as well as creating new features like recalls and housebound modules and curbside plugin, an ERM in Koha. It just, the list goes on and on. So the support is out there. We'll probably talk about this in a bit, but within the Bywater community, you have a support of all the library partners that we support. So we have a listserv that anybody can talk to any Koha user that are supported by Bywater. We also have a Slack channel that is also a great place to talk with other folks about what's going on, questions they have, help they need. That support is really crucial because sometimes you just want to reach out to somebody local or reach out to somebody you know. And then, of course, you have the larger community of Koha users, which has another listserv. They have another chat channel. So you have the potential to have just a huge pool of supportive folks, and even talking to developers, you know, one-on-one. You have all those opportunities. So one of those myths that, you know, I guess I never thought about, but this is something that a lot of folks have talked about, is the thought that anyone can change the code of open source software. I guess I never thought about it, but now that I've been around some developers in the last few years, I guess I can see how that could potentially happen. However, with Koha, and I know the other open source softwares that we support, Aspen, libkey, Metabase, there are quality assurance things happening. So there is a process, a development process that would, you can't just go in there and make some changes and it's going to affect everybody. The Koha community has a very strict process in which somebody submits something to the community and said, oh, wouldn't it be great? And then somebody fixes that and says, this is how I would do it. At any point, a discussion can happen on that bug and say, well, I don't like the way that that's being fixed, or I think it should happen a different way. Once that has happened and it's agreed upon that that's a good patch, there are two people that sign off on it. So it's two separate testers to say, yes, this works to solve the problem or to make this enhancement happen. And then there is a QA person that goes through and kind of looks at a larger picture of the code to make sure not only is this one thing being fixed, but it's not affecting anything over here or anything. So it's looking at a bigger collaborative vision. And then, of course, you have a release manager, which is the entire gatekeeper to say yes. And they look at it again and say, this works. And then it gets pushed out to the next release and everybody gets it. But that access to the code is not happening at any point until that release manager says yes, and then releases that new code as the new version. A couple of other things that I wanted to make sure we talked about is that open source is very forward thinking. So currently it's really fantastic as we talk about how Koha and Aspen Discovery specifically are working with other softwares. So because it's open source, we have open APIs. We can work with any vendor that also has open APIs. So that allows us to really assist a library in a larger world to say, we know that the Koha ILS is what you want, but we also know that you'd like to connect to Envisionware, PayPal, Biblioteca, PatronPoint, Communico, SIS, single sign-ons. I mean, the list is so large to make your patron experience and your staff experience amazing. And then as new products are being put out and you as a library is like, I really want to be able to do that because that's going to also enhance my experience. Again, that interoperability between Koha and other open source software or not open source software, but something that has open APIs are just really just fantastic and just get super excited. As well as we're going back to that community, is that community is working together to improve and grow the software. Specifically with Koha, you know, the users that use Koha and Aspen Discovery are saying this would be better to make it happen. So it's the librarians pushing those ideas that are saying, let's go forward because this would be great. So working together and then growing that software together. Sometimes you hear that developments really aren't going to happen maybe in a proprietary software because, that's not on the roadmap, or the sales. I know I'm sales, but the sales think, folks think a different development needs to happen. Koha, Aspen, they're all listening to the librarians. They're all focused on those needs because that's our goal, is to make libraries work better, happy. Open source means user-driven development. And I cannot say this enough, but the users have a voice in the development. So you have all the power in the world to say, I would like to see this happen. And that could grow in the community. You could have a developer that just says, oh, that would be either A, super easy, or B, super awesome to be able to create. What a great idea. And then they can, code it and get it into the community. It's user focused. So the development cycle is listening to the librarian, and that's the enhancements that they want to hear from, is those librarians on the ground, at the circ desk, at the reference desk, in that, bookmobile or bike mobile out there saying, I would love for this to happen. That's the most important part. So to know that your voice is heard is something that really should resonate in your heart, because we all want to be heard. Continuous updates. So, Koha as well as Aspen, those updates are not ever stopping. Like there's not to say, well, this year we're not going to do any. Twice a year, where you're going to get those Koha updates. Once a month, you're going to get those Aspen updates. Koha has micro updates once a month as well. So those are always going to happen. And, and I talked about how, open source is free. Go in and download it. Bywater, that's what our goal is to really have you understand that open source, the stigma behind open source is should just be forgotten about. You should focus on what works for your library. How do you feel as though your staff and patrons are really going to experience and be driven by this software, and then how you can move forward. Bywater is there to host and support any library that wants to work with Koha and Aspen Discovery. And that's what we do. So we push those updates. You don't need IT staff. Those updates are being done by our staff. We're making sure you're on the most current version and getting all the new fun features and enhancement, and you're always ready to go at the library. So it's important to know, as we talked about, this is maybe like more of a recap, but I just love to hear sometimes myself talk about how great Koha and open source is, but the integrations, other third-party products working together with Koha to make your job easier. Just try to think about not having to maintain all that and having a company that does it for you, to say, hey, we use Unique Gentle Nudge. Can we set that up? We use Shoutbomb. Yes. And that's our job, is to make that happen for you. So making your daily life easier. Getting in there and being part of what happens in the next release. That's a power that everyone has that uses the software. So you could be part of a pretty fantastic community of users. Koha is used worldwide. Now, of course, we don't support everyone worldwide. There's plenty of other support companies all over the world that also support Koha and Aspen Discovery. But again, remember, it's free and downloadable. So millions of users may be using it without a support company, and they're doing it themselves. So that flexibility in being able to say, hey, I'm pretty smart at what I do. I could do this. Or I have 84 libraries that I need somebody to manage that Koha system, and that's what we're here for. And then my favorite is being able to work together and share the ideas. Koha has a yearly conference. Last year it was in Kansas, and we got together for a few days, and we're able to have users of Koha share presentations, have workshops, have the ability to just really talk and talk about documentation and the future of code and all the fancy words that I'm not into, but I'm really into, like meeting the librarians and seeing what they're doing with their Koha system, so that working together. This year, we're going to be in Finland for our annual conference. We also have a Koha US group that is specifically for Koha users. I don't think specifically, I think there's some Canadian ones in there too, to the United States. And their conference is going to be in Portsmouth, New Hampshire in September. So a more local maybe opportunity for you versus going, internationally. Again, the same concept, working together, having the ability to meet others and share those ideas and maybe collaborate on something or find out a new thing that you could do. I mean, I don't know, but I think I'm pretty sold on this. But join the open source community. Bywater supports and hosts these open source products: Folio, Aspen Discovery, Koha, LibKey, Coral, and Metabase. I'm sure you've been to our website because you found this webinar. We have all these products. If you're interested in any of these, they have the same groundwork. I really probably focus a lot more on Koha, but the groundwork is all there. The open source philosophy is all rooted in each one of these softwares, as well as our company. We believe in, open communication, open documentation, just being able to share the resources that are within the community and then creating our own resources, making sure our partners are knowledgeable to use Koha and comfortable to use Koha and then want to share it with others, or Coral or LibKey or Aspen Discover, all those. So that's what we in turn do is, if your library is not on Koha or are interested, we would help you through that process of migrating you, teaching you Koha through the education process, working with your data, setting up those system integrations we talked about, whether that's, through APIs or SIP connections. That's all included, and we have amazing system admins that would work through that. And then we'll just watch you grow and flourish within the open source community and maybe see you at the next conference. Who knows, right? So really, that wraps up my open source software. I'm hoping somebody goes and maybe downloads one of those softwares and just sees what it's all about. No, I'm just kidding. But if you have any questions, please let us know. I'll put our contact information on the end screen. We'll send out this recording for you to watch. A couple of the other upcoming webinars that are coming, we're talking about consortiums moving to Koha and Aspen. We've got a panel of current users of Koha and Aspen that are just dying to answer any questions. And that's in April. And then we will give a whole introduction to Koha in the May session. All these are linked on our website. And there's our contact information if you want to contact us. It's just sales@bywatersolutions.com, or give us a call. Check out our website. If you have any questions, we're always here to answer those.